Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of Loremasters HS. It is us, it is I, your co host, Blakarot, and today with me we have.
Goliath the Dwarf, your resident Hearthstone and Warcraft lore master, at your service, and very happy to be here.
And you know me, just your average day one legend kind of guy. Well, actually, I didn't hit legend yet. I'm at Diamond 3. So, you're day 2, day 3 legend guy. Maybe next episode I'll be a day 1 legend. Really excited though.
Oh,
Speaking of legends, yo, we got a really exciting episode tonight. This legendary card here was actually, I think, the first one I hit legend with Paladin. So I had it golden. I really like the animation, the way that light shines off the blade. I can't wait to hear like how this guy even got this blade or what this blade even is. I'm really excited for tonight's episode. Our legendary for this month, we are showcasing the story of Tirion Fordring. Me, uh, the student here, Goliath is the lore master. He's gonna educate me up, and in due time, I'll become a lore master. I'm really excited to find out what the story on Tyrion is. I have no clue. I know there's plenty of people out there just like me. So without further ado, we're gonna have Goliath the Dwarf hook us up with some story time. I'm ready. Lore Masters HS.
all right, let's get started. This is a story that's a bit on the densely packed side because it's going to be tying in elements from a few larger stories. We're going to be talking about where the Paladin class even came from in the first place. So, this is also not only the story of Tyrion, this is a story, it's going to involve the Lich King, it's going to involve Death Knights, and where an entire class in Hearthstone even came from. So yeah, let's get started where it all began, which is way back during the Second War between the Alliance and Horde. At this point, the Horde was basically under the puppet control of Gul'dan, our primary warlock hero in Hearthstone,
Yeah.
and Gul'dan had just invented with his fellow warlocks a nasty new weapon, the first Death Knights. But these weren't the
Hmm.
type of Death Knights that you see in like Death Knight cards in the Frozen Throne expansion. These were basically the souls of orc warlocks that had been stuffed into the dead bodies of human knights. And they had powerful necromantic abilities, and kind of like the Nazgul in Lord of the Rings, actually, the whole, there's just this aura of terror around them.
Okay.
And when the Horde sicks them out against the Alliance on the battlefield, it's like no one stands a chance, man.
Yeah.
They are brutal.
Sounds
And so
crazy.
the Alliance, yeah. And so the Alliance decides that they need something that can help to combat this force of darkness. And this is where our pal Tirion comes in, along with some of his friends. So, Tirion was a knight. He became a knight at the age of 18, so he was a pretty early achiever on that. And he also was a pretty religious guy, a member of the Church of Light that the human kingdoms followed in the kingdom of Lordaeron. And he studied under, religiously, Archbishop Alonzus Fowl. And at this point, he was one of the people who was recommended to become the first Paladins because that was their answer to the Death Knights. They said, okay, these
Hmm.
guys are
Okay.
using, they are basically soldiers who have powerful dark magic. We have knights, we have clerics, but the clerics are really bad fighters and they get killed easily, and the
Yeah.
knights don't have any magic. So, what if we merge the two, have some people who are trained in both, and then they can be our secret weapon against these Death Knights? And Tyrion was one of the first five. The others were Uther, who, of course, is the representative hero for Paladins in Hearthstone.
Yes.
Tirion, who we have a card for in Scholomance, and two other guys named Satan Datherhand and Gavin Rad the Dyer. These guys were all specially trained, and they were given special books stop me if you've heard this one before, called Librams.
Oh yeah, they were given Librams.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, Librams are special holy books that paladins have. These five were basically they were very ancient relics of the church, and they each represented a special attribute that that paladin was meant to embody. So this was
Wow.
things like the Libram of protection, the Libram of justice,
Libram of
holiness,
Justice.
compassion.
Yes.
Yep. And Tirion Fordring, he was entrusted with the Libram of retribution. So
Oh.
he was the one to embody the retribution of right against the wrongs done by forces of darkness. That was kind of his whole thing there.
Okay.
And so, yeah, then he and the other paladins went and served out during that period of the Second War and helped drive back the horde. And then a lot of time went by, and Tyrion, not so much say retired, but when there wasn't a bunch of dark Death Knights and orcs that needed fighting,
Yeah.
he could relax a little bit more. He actually served as a governor in a principality called Hearthglen, and he got married and he had a son, and things were overall pretty well for him until the day he made a decision that would get him kicked out of the Paladins.
Whoa, whoa. Okay, okay. It sounds like there's a lot to unpack there. Before we do,
Mm-hmm.
and before we move along, I want to address something. So, you're telling me that there was a point in time where paladins didn't exist and they got created purely to fight against death knights that Gul'dan created,
Exactly. Yep.
and they got to fight with librams. That was their source of power, or is that
Uh,
tools?
well, their source of power, they had received special blessings in a ceremony that gave them kind of supercharged holy light abilities.
Got it.
But
Okay.
the artifacts, the Librams, were partially a source of power, I think, but also just kind of a representative of it's their kind of badge of office in a sense
Hmm.
as well.
Got it. That's cool. Okay. So hearing this side of it, man, like when I play Libram Paladin now, it's gonna feel so much cooler. Like, oh man, I didn't know that. I don't know any of the stories and when I learn them, but hearing it this way, that they got created to fight against Death Knights, that's pretty sick. Pretty cool.
Yeah, so if you ever want to arrange playing with a friend, they play a Death Knight deck, you're Paladin, then you can really enact that fantasy there. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, so essentially, oh, and this, by the way, this order of paladins was the Knights of the Silver Hand. So the paladin hero power, when you summon a member of the Silver Hand,
Yes.
that's where that comes from. And
Ah.
there's going to be a couple times that pops up here in a few different renditions.
Okay. Excellent. That's pretty cool.
So, moving along, we have Tyrion. He is a paladin. He is, he has a pretty good family life. He has a decent position of authority. Everyone looks up to him. Um, but then one day, he stumbles across this old orc in an abandoned tower named Eitrigg, and they very naturally fight because humans and orcs have been at war.
Yeah.
But then Tyrion gets smashed by a piece of the ruined tower that falls on him,
Dang.
and he wakes up later on to find that he's been pulled out of the rubble and kind of rudimentarily healed, and he realizes that the orc Eitrigg is the one who did this, and then he's just kind of, wait, what? Like orcs can be decent people, because the thing is that the orcs, when they had invaded, the people had only seen the worst of the orcs, the corrupted version of the orcs, when they were tricked by Gul'dan into drinking demon blood and were essentially controlled by the demons of the Burning Legion to
Oh,
go and,
that's
yeah,
dirty.
the whole idea with that was that the orcs through Gul'dan would weaken all of the forces of Azeroth so that the demon army could come in and sweep it up with no resistance.
Yeah.
But that didn't quite work out. So the orcs, they were actually very shamanistically based, sometimes peaceful, very much a warrior culture though, because they their world they came from was pretty savage, and it was kind of a fight or die type of life that they lived. So but they had a great senses of honor and nobility in their own way. And eventually, Tirion managed to track down Eitrig, and he sat down and talked and learned about this story of the orcs that he hadn't known before. And then he kind of realized that, wow, an orc is actually capable of having honor.
Yeah.
And this just kind of blew his mind. It shifted his entire worldview. And he basically he was very much suddenly a, judge people by the content of their character and not by their race, in a very literal sense, because that's
Hey, that's pretty cool to hear.
Yeah, there's so many different types of beings in, that we call the races in World of Warcraft and Hearthstone and the World of Azeroth. And that was just kind of his big realization moment that it can be anyone. Only problem was that some of the other members of the Alliance, they didn't have this realization, and they tried to go and arrest Eitrig, assuming that he was a war criminal. Eitrig had abandoned the corrupt horde. He's like, I want nothing to do with this. I want nothing to do with you demon blood drinkers. Which I would say is a very smart idea.
Very smart.
But Tirion actually, because he was very determined to defend this orc who had helped him, who was innocent of wrongdoing, and he actually attacked the Alliance soldiers who were trying to take Eitrig away. Unfortunately for him,
man.
that meant that he was put on trial.
Yeah.
And stripped of his rank as a paladin and sent into exile. Like literally, Uther himself performed a ceremony that stripped Tirion of the special blessings that had been bestowed on him when he became a paladin.
So this is why Tyrion's a card and not a hero portrait.
Seems not quite so much, but he is the for the hero portraits. It's just that they decide on the most iconic that they can to get you started, and Uther just has a bit more fame in his story, largely because it's connected with Arthas and the Lich King and all that stuff. Tirion is famous, but a little less well known.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, but no. But Tirion hasn't been fully depowered, actually, because even though they stripped away kind of his special souped up powers that had been given him at his initial ceremony, Tirion went back. He freed Eitrig from prison, and Eitrig was wounded, and Tirion did the only thing he could. He tried to call on the light to heal him, and even though all his blessings had been taken away, the light still responded to him, and he was able to heal. And that was kind of the sign that he had done the right thing. All the other people were wrong, saying that you shouldn't be helping the orc. But that was kind of the you might say the divine sign, because the light works for people who have passion, pure passions and intentions. And so that was his big thing right there. He did have to still go into exile. Thankfully, his family wasn't exiled, and he actually managed to kind of sneak in disguise when his son grew up and became a paladin himself, who is Tirion Fordring, who is one of the new cards that we've gotten in the core sets recently. And that's Tyrion's son, who became a paladin. And they kind of had a little wink and nod moment. And then Tirion just kind of disappeared because he wasn't supposed to be there. So
cool. He's got a son. When I saw that card get revealed, I was just like, wow, look at this card. I was like, I saw the last name, and I was like, wait, it's not a paladin, but are they related? And I think I might have hopped over to Orange People Wild Discord. I think I tagged you. I don't know who did it. Someone did it, but I was like, hey, they're related. I think you might have confirmed it. Is that a thing? Am I making this up?
Yeah, they're related. They're father and son.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
actually didn't realize this character existed until this card came out, and I went and did some more research on it because
Oh,
he's he appeared in some of the oldest versions of World of Warcraft, which I wasn't playing at the time, so I never went on those particular quests myself that involved him. But that's something that we're going to touch on very soon here.
yeah.
I will also note that when Tirion was rescuing Eitrig, he was actually able to do so partially because all the guards were distracted by a band of orcs that came in to raid, and they were actually trying to rescue Eitrig too. And it turned out that the horde had changed during all this time. It was now led by Thrall, our shaman hero,
Interesting.
who had reformed the horde in a more going back to their more noble roots, getting rid of all of the corruption. And he was very impressed with Tirion, and Tirion became one of the few humans that Thrall held with such esteem and honor. So that they have a really good kind of interracial, cross faction sense of mutual respect going on here. And that's going to come in handy a bit later on
I
for
bet.
Tyrion
Yeah.
as a neutral leader. So moving on to the sun here,
Yes.
it so happens that this is something where things get a little crazy. This is something that touches on a larger story that I'm going to have to summarize.
Okay.
But basically, um, we have a whole thing where there is the Lich King and the Scourge, and the Lich King was initially working with some dreadlords, but they were actually his jailers, and they kind of there was a whole thing where the Arthas and the Lich King worked together to break him free of the dreadlords' control, and then the dreadlords are suddenly on the run, and one of these dreadlords killed a one of the original paladins, Sire Dathrahan, and or Satan, sorry, Satan Dathrahan, and it possessed his body and infiltrated the Paladins of the Silver Hand in order to manipulate them, corrupt them, and kind of use them as a shield against the undead that were coming after him. And this faction of the Silver Hand became the Scarlet Crusade. This also contains characters like Sally Whitemane, for example. So the Inquisitor Whitemane card, she's a member of this faction as well. Um, yeah, and because
That's cool.
the Scarlet Crusade became a bunch of radical zealots twisted by the demon who was possessing the guy that they thought was the paladin.
Yes.
Um, and then there was another group that is like, hey, we don't like how radical you're going. Like they were kind of human purists. They thought, if you're not a human, then you might be carrying the plague of undeath, and we need to get rid of you. And we hate all undead, no matter if they turn out to be on the friendly side. And just really, really radical. Um, and so then there was a separate group that broke off who didn't like what they were doing. The other half of the Silver Hand became known as the Argent Dawn. And that they'll all come into play later. But for the Scarlet Crusade, Tyrion's son ended up becoming the guy in charge of the Scarlet Crusade. He was a radical guy. He was the High Lord of the Scarlet Crusade.
Oh,
And that really upset Tyrion. See, you kind of had to watch all this from a distance. But in the meantime, Tyrion was visited by the son of the one guy who had been incorruptible in the Scarlet Crusade. This guy's name was Alexandros Mograine, and he wielded a special sword called the Ashbringer. That's the sword that Tirion
Oh,
holds in the card art.
okay.
And now we need to go and talk about where this thing came from.
Yeah, definitely.
So this was a special sword that was infused with holy lights. Back during the war against the orcs and death knights and all of that stuff, there had been discovered by the alliance this orb or disc that just emanated pure darkness. And so they tried to destroy it with the power of the light, but it actually just kind of switched it and it became this emblem of holy light.
Hmm.
And they decided, let's turn this into a sword.
Why
So
not?
they did, and it became known as the Ashbringer, and it was very good at killing undead because it just turns them to ash.
Yeah.
Thus the name. And so this was wielded by a guy named Alexandros, who was pretty much on the incorruptible side. And so, the demon who is secretly controlling it is like, hey, this guy's got to go. So he corrupted one of Alexandros' sons and got him to murder his own with the Ashbringer.
Uh,
Uh, and this corrupted the Ashbringer. And then Kel'Thuzad came along and decided to raise Alexandros as a Death Knight, wielding the corrupted Ashbringer. And he
uh,
became one of the four horsemen, members of the Scourge. So, yeah, like I said, a lot of stuff
ooh.
getting packed in here.
Okay.
Uh, but then Alexandros's other son, named Darion, decided that he wanted to free his father from the being stuck as undead controlled by Kel'Thuzad. And so he managed to go and infiltrate Naxxramas, which, of course, we have the adventure based off of that in Hearthstone, the first
Yeah, the
adventure.
curse of Naxxramas.
Mm-hmm. And so that there were a couple different versions of the Four Horsemen. The ones that we fight in that Hearthstone adventure are the ones after Alexandros, but he was the first one. And so his son Darion manages to defeat him, but his father's soul is still trapped in the corrupted Ashbringer. And he's like, I want to free my dad's soul. And now we get to where this is relevant. He goes to Tirion because he hears,
Oh,
Tirion
yeah.
is the exile paladin who lives out in the hut. He's kind of like, the old hermit in a sense who
Yep.
you go to for some wisdom. And Darion is like, can you get my dad's soul out of this cursed blade? And Tirion kind of looks over, he does some paladin light experiments, and he's like, no, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do here, but if you are able to perform an act of love and sacrifice that's even greater than the act that corrupted this blade and killed your father, then he'll be free. And Darion has no clue what he means by that. This really is the trope of like the see the mysterious old hermit who talks in cryptic riddles and
Yeah, I was gonna say it
everything.
sounds really cryptic-y. Yeah.
Yeah. He figures it out when he goes to a place called Light's Hope Chapel, which is a headquarters of a lot of paladins,
Okay.
and the Scourge is attacking it. And Darion realizes to do is make the ultimate sacrifice to defeat the Scourge and free his father. So he impales himself on the
Ooh.
Ashbringer,
Oh.
and that act of self sacrifice not only frees his father's soul, but it is able to awaken other souls. Because here's the thing, Light's Hope Chapel is consecrated ground, it is very powerful with holy light, with holy magic, with holy souls who have been buried there in order to prevent them from being raised as undead. And so that just kind of raises a bunch of those holy souls that helped fight back against the undead there. And that's a whole other little side story that Tirion played a part in, but it's important for the story of the Ashbringer itself.
Yes.
Do we need to recap anything? Am I going to?
Oh, no, no, no. We're I think we're doing fantastic.
Okay, great.
Just no,
Because, like,
just on my side, I just want to make sure I'm listening to the cue of when the visuals. So I think we're
Of
doing great.
course, of course.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a lot that we're packing in here.
Oh yeah. Um,
But so yes, when we get to this point, um, Tyrion has been seeing his son grow up, and he manages to collect, or with the help of various adventurers. Now we're into World of Warcraft quests, so a lot of things are accomplished by adventurers, aka
yes.
player characters. Um,
yeah.
Basically, gathering a bunch of his son's mementos from when he was a kid and just kind of using them as a remember who you used to be. And eventually, Tyrion's able to kind of convince his son, who remember is the High Lord of the Zealous Scarlet Crusade. He is way up at the top here.
Yeah, man.
He decides, maybe I don't want to do this. So when you play the card of his son, and what does he say when you play him?
Tirion Fordring.
Yep.
You know,
You remember
you know what?
his line?
When you ask me, it blinks my head. But as soon as you say it, I'll be like, oh yeah, go
That's how
for
it always works. He says, "This is not what we stood for."
oh, okay,
That's
okay.
his realization that this Scarlet Crusade,
Yeah.
this is not what it really means to be a paladin. And so he wants to defect away from it. Unfortunately, some of the other members of the Scarlet Crusade catch wind of this and decide they want to kill the whole Fordring family.
Oh, damn.
Tyrion's able to fight his off, but he kind of gets there just in time to see his son killed. And then he kills his son's killer. And then he decides, okay,
Sounds brutal.
enough is enough. I am going to reform the original Silverhand Order. None of the Scarlet Crusade stuff, and those Argent guys are nice, but no, I'm going to form a new Silverhand Paladin Order, and so that's the sort of thing that Tyrion's going for there. Um,
Wow.
so then,
That's so. Oh
moving
man,
on,
that's so sad.
yeah,
He witnessed his son's downfall.
yeah. At least he also witnessed his son's redemption before he was killed, which is better than nothing. But
Hmm.
yeah, that's kind of the thing that inspired him. He's like, okay, I can't just keep being the old hermit anymore. I need to do something. I need to be active in all of this again.
Seriously.
Um, yeah. So um, now we go back to the story of the Ashbringer
Yes.
because after Darian sacrificed himself, unfortunately, it just so happens that Kel'Thuzad was in the neighborhood, and he says, "What do you know? Here is a new guy that I can raise to replace his father as a Death Knight and a Four Horseman." And so, yeah, now Darian is stuck wielding a corrupted Ashbringer as a brainwashed minion of the Lich King, and that's not fun. Um,
Probably not.
but so we get to the point where the Lich King is deciding that, okay, the time's come for me to just launch my undead armies across all of Azeroth because the best thing is for everyone to become undead. Then there won't be any more disagreements. Everyone will be in harmony. We can all fight against any demons or whatever. Everyone will be mindless undead under my control. What could go wrong? That's
What could go
basically the
wrong?
Lich King's logic there.
Hmm.
And so, but he realizes that old Tyrion might be a threat to his plans. And so he orchestrates for Darian to lead an assault on Light's Hope Chapel. And so we have our picture here of Tyrion facing off against the Lich King himself.
yeah.
That's where all this comes in, because what happens is that while they're attacking Light's Hope Chapel, Tyrion comes out to help defend it, and he manages to get through to Darian along with the spirit of Darian's father, and he manages to break free from the Lich King's control, and he tosses the Ashbringer to Tirion, who is able to fully purify it now that the initial curse has been taken care of with the self sacrifice. Tirion, now he can do his whole light hocus pocus and presto, corruption is gone. This is the pure Ashbringer again. And he's able to drive off the Lich King over there, away from Light's Help Chapel. So that's what he's doing in that little picture right there.
I see.
And
Okay,
that's
okay.
and that's also where Death Knights start to break away from the Lich King's control, and that's why it's possible to have friendly Death Knights now that you can play as in the game, who are not working for the Lich King, and
Oh,
they're called the Knights of the Ebon Blade. So if there's any, I can't remember if there's any Hearthstone cards that say Ebon Blade this or that, but if there are, that's where that comes from.
yeah. As we do this, I'll look on my side and do my little research. But you can continue, sir.
All right. So now moving on to chapter in the story, we have the assault on the Lich King himself in Northrend. So this is during the entire expansion of World of Warcraft called Wrath of the Lich King, where basically you have the armies that are going to the Lich King stronghold to stop this undead invasion right at its source. And basically, they come across the little problem that, well, when you are fighting an army of undead, if you have a large army and a killed, they kind of instantly get raised up to be fighting against you on the undead army side. And so Tyrion decided that, when we're going to go fight the Lich King, maybe we should have a small elite task force instead of huge armies that might just provide fodder to be turned against us. Tyrion had already, yeah.
Real quick, sorry. A little bit had cut out there. So I just want to piece in, just to fill in real quick. You had
Oh,
said
sure.
when we go fight this Lich King, we need to realize that our soldiers are gonna fall, and then they can be turned against us, right?
Right. And so the idea is that if you have a crack squad of elite fighters instead of a large army, then they actually stand a better chance,
Got it.
just like the strongest champions possible.
Okay.
Now, at this point, Tyrion had decided that he was going to merge his new Silver Hand order with the Argent Dawn and form a new order called the Argent Crusade.
Oh,
So and that was specially designed to go and attack the Lich King. So we have a couple of Hearthstone cards that say like Argent Crusader or something,
oh
I
yeah.
believe.
And when they attack, they say for the crusade.
Yes. So this
Yo.
is a good crusade, not like the Scarlet.
Yeah.
Just think like scarlet, red, blood. Argent is a term that means white in like old knight heraldry. So you have kind of like the blood red versus the pure white. That's how you separate the crusades and
Okay.
remember which is the good and which is the bad.
Yeah.
So then, just as a recap, in order to make sure all, because that's a lot of paladin orders that we're going through now. So we start out with the Silver Hand. Silver Hand gets split into the Scarlet Crusade and the Argent. Tyrion decides that he's going to form his own Silver Hand. Then eventually, new Silver Hand merges with Argent Dawn to become Argent Crusade. And Scarlet Crusade is still causing trouble in their own little area. They aren't really involved with attacking the Lich King.
Got it.
So that's how all that's going. But
Okay.
now we come to the origin of an entire Hearthstone expansion, in fact. So there's a decent amount that's tied in with this because the Grand Tournament
Oh.
patch, that set, is inspired by, it has its own little Hearthstone twist.
Yeah.
But what is called the Argent Tournament, named after the Argent Crusade, where Tyrion is holding basically kind of like these Olympic Games in order to determine who should qualify for this elite crack squad that's going to go and fight the Lich King. We need the best of the best
Oh.
here. So, what better way to figure that out by having them all compete against each other in various ways? And the winners get the grand prize of marching to certain doom against a very powerful undead being.
The grand prize of death. What the? You gotta fight. You got to fight to get on this team. Probably die and then die anyway. All right, all right.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, but it has to be done there. And so that is in our little picture here. That's actually some art from the patch where they had this event, these games. And if you look at the, so you have Tirion in the front, and he has the Ashbringer, and there's a lot of the different champions behind him representing different players. And way in the back, you can see some banners. That is the symbol of the Argent Crusade right there. So that the little kind of white sun on a white banner in a sense. That's their little calling card. And so then when we move on from Crusade here, tournament, which for the Hearthstone thing, their idea was, well, that first tournament was such a success. Let's just keep on having these tournaments for fun now, even though we don't have to go and fight a Lich King. So that's the idea with the Hearthstone Grand Tournament there. But so then when we go to attack the Lich King at his stronghold in Ice Crown Citadel, there's a lot of different characters that we have to fight past as member of this crack squad team that Tirion is leading. And a lot of them are characters who appeared in Knights of the Frozen Throne, like Blood Queen Lanethal, Professor Putricide, just a bunch of those characters. This is where they fit into the story. They're Lich King's strongest minions that you have to fight alongside. And Tirion is right there helping to lead the charge against all of these guys. Until at last, they came to the Lich King himself, very top on his frozen throne right there.
Yeah.
And they had a bit of a surprise because you see, there's this guy named Volvar Fordrag.
Whoa.
He was a paladin. He was basically in command of the Alliance army fighting against the Lich King. And he had a little near-death experience, or very, very near-death experience, where he got doused by undead plague, and then he got burned by the fire of Alexstrasza and her red dragonflight when they were purifying the plague. And then the Lich King came and collected him. So this sort of not quite dead, not quite alive, burning guy who the Lich King is attempting to torture in order to turn him into Knight. But Bolvar is just very determined. He's like, no, I won't give in. I won't give in. I'm not going to become evil. You can't curse, even though this torture really, really hurts. So that's what the Lich King's been doing when Tirion and the adventurers go and fight him. And it turns out that this whole plan, this whole thing of this was actually played right into the Lich King's hands. His best idea, his ultimate goal, his manipulation of all of this was that whole crack squad. He actually wanted that to happen because he gets the most powerful champions in all of Asgard to come and fight him.
Mm-hmm.
They come to him. He kills them. Like, he literally kills you in the raid as part of the story. And he's preparing to raise you into his most powerful Death Knights yet. And then there will be no stop. And during the fight, he froze Tirion in a block of ice, and who is wielding the Ashbringer.
Okay.
But Tirion manages to call upon the light to break himself free from the ice, and he shatters Frostmourne with the Ashbringer.
Oh, that's
Frostmourne being the Lich King's sword, which kept the souls that were stolen from the people he killed.
Yeah.
And so, and in our little picture here of the Lich King and Tirion, you'll see that the Lich King is kind of being attacked by a bunch of spirits. Yeah. Those are all of the spirits that were freed from Frostmourne when it broke, and they're very, very pissed at the Lich King for torturing them for all that time.
Of course, yeah, I'd be pissed too.
And
that's pretty sick.
Yeah, and that's what enables the Lich King to ultimately defeated. Uh, and yeah, so that is one of Tyrion's greatest moments, where even though everyone else, even the best raiders in World of Warcraft, you just can't beat the Lich King because he's too powerful. But Tyrion manages to use his faith to break himself from being controlled and go and destroys one of the key sources of the Lich King's power.
Yeah.
So everyone owes a lot to Tyrion in
Okay.
this moment. This is like his big shining moment, man.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. So Tyrion, when the card is destroyed, you get the weapon, the Ashbringer, and when you play the Lich King card, one of the five, I think it's five random cards you can get, Death Knight cards, is actually Frostmourne. So it's pretty cool to hear
Mm-hmm.
you explain this side of it, uh,
Yeah,
the backstory on those weapon cards.
yeah. They are interesting. They're weapon cards that aren't just cards you have. And yeah, that's why
Oh,
each of
sorry, glad
those.
that we lost you there. Say it again.
Oh, and yeah, so those are weapon cards you can't just get on their own. They come from the character, and that's why you get Ashbringer from Tyrion and Frostmourne from the Lich King.
Yeah, that's so damn. That's so sweet. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
but after the Lich King had died, one of the spirits, who turned out to actually be Arthas's dad, who was one of the first people he'd killed even before he became the Lich King, he kind of reveals this whole plot twist that there has to be someone who is in control of all of these undead, because if there isn't a Lich King, they're just going to run around crazy and just destroy everything anyway. So Tyrion decides that, okay, I guess, and the way you become the Lich King is you put on the Lich King at the Helm of Domination,
Yeah.
that's filled with all the necromantic powers. And Tyrion's is considering, he's like, I guess I need to take on this burden. It's the noble thing to do. And he's just about to put the helmet on, but then Bolvar, who has been right there the whole time, he says, wait, Tyrion, no, let me do it.
Uh oh.
I am a complete mess right now. Well, I mean, look at me. I'm all burned and everything. That's our card, Bolvar Fireblood. When he says, this last act of sacrifice is mine to bear,
Mm-hmm.
that is what he's talking about. He says, I will take on this burden. I will become the jailer of the damned. I'll sit here on the frozen throne. And instead of using this power to attack the world, I'm going to use it to try to contain all these undead and prevent them from harming anybody. And so,
Mm.
reluctantly, Tyrion agrees, and he crowns Bolvar the Lich King. And
Uh
Bolvar
oh.
he just kind of freezes in the frozen throne and semi hibernates, trying to keep control of the scourge for a really long time, several years and expansions worth of material before we hear from him again. And it's a real challenge for him because he still has a noble paladin of justice,
Yeah.
but that kind of clashes with the influence of the undead powers that are trying to slowly corrupt him.
Yeah, man. So seeing this card, Bolvar Fireblood now, he has a totally new badass cool feel to him. Knowing that he had stepped up and offered to wear that Lich King helmet.
Right. And we already had a
Oh, we lost you there, Goliath.
and we had a previous card of him, all known when you see him before he got all burned by dragonfire and such. But yeah, this is his act of sacrifice when he takes on the burden of becoming the Lich King.
Yeah.
Um, and then moving on from the Lich King, we have a while that passes, and during all this, leading the Knights of the Silver Hand and the Argent Crusade, and basic protecting Azeroth from various things. Not really super notable until it comes to the third invasion of the Virgin.
Mm.
So this is another. How do we summarize how this happened? But
Okay.
basically, I'm going to give you the short version. It won't necessarily make sense, but this is what happened. So Garrosh Hellscream, who is the warrior here, he became a big tyrant, ruling over the horde, and got defeated. But he managed to escape and travel back in time to the orc world, where he tried to create this alternate timeline orc army to take over Azeroth, and that's a thing that people fight against. But what happened is that because it's another orc home drain, there's an alternate timeline Gul'dan. So Gul'dan is kind of back, but it's a different Gul'dan. And this Gul'dan escapes to Azeroth and brings the entire Burning Legion there. And
Oh,
so yeah, it's
that's not
alternate
good.
universe, complicated time travel stuff
Okay,
that
okay.
we don't have time to even try to explain. But so basically, what happens is that there's a new version of Gul'dan,
Yes.
and he brought in the Burning Legion, and so they're attempting to stop this invading army.
Okay.
And Tirion leads his Argent Crusade in an attempt to stop all this, but they fail miserably.
Oh.
Gul'dan captures Tirion and is drops him into fell lava. So think like warlock magic mixed with lava, right in front of the Alliance and Horde in order to them. Um, and this big demon called Croesus does some damage to him as well.
Uh-oh.
Tyrion doesn't die right there, but he is imprisoned and tortured. Eventually, there's a new version of the Silver Hand. So this is the third version of the Silver Hand Order. Like I
Oh
said, lots of
man.
Paladin orders. So the Silver Hand is reformed at Light's Hope Chapel, and they go and rescue Tirion, but unfortunately he succumbs to his wounds from the torture soon after and passes on the Ashbringer to a new wielder. This wielder is the player character if you are playing a paladin, and coincidentally, remember Tyrion's special Librum that he was retribution.
Yes.
Well, you can during the Legion expansion, you could only wield the Ashbringer if you are playing a spec of the class, a specialized set of skills that was called Retribution Paladin. And
Oh.
so then Tyrion passes the Ashbringer on to you if that's the type of character that you're playing,
Okay.
and so you become the new High Lord of the Silver Hands, and Tyrion's body is honored in a service there, and he's buried beneath Light's Hope Chapel, and you go off and do some paladin things. Now, there's another thing that happens during this invasion because everybody's trying to chip in to defeat this demon army that is going to destroy all of existence.
Yeah.
And the Knights of the Ebon Blade, they are doing their stuff too. This is a time where Bolvar King finally starts doing stuff and teams up with the Knights of the Ebon Blade and says, you know what we need? We need a new set of Horsemen Death Knight. So what I want you to do is I want you to go and resurrect some of the most powerful champions from the Horde and Alliance's history, and we're going to turn them into a crack squad of Death Knights to be the fourth horsemen here. If you play the card Uther of the Ebon Blade, now Uther is, as a Death Knight, is not canon. That's a Hearthstone only thing.
Okay.
But the horsemen that you summon with the hero power, summon all four and you win the game.
Yes.
Really fun if you're playing a clever one-turn kill deck.
Yep.
Those are the characters that you resurrect. So there's Nazgrim, Death Lord Nazgrim. There's Trollbane, who was a king of the Alliance way back.
Oh,
There's
okay, okay.
Sally Whitemane, who remember, she was a member of the Scarlet Crusade. Then she actually gets resurrected into being one of these horsemen.
Yeah.
And the final one that the Lich King wants, this is a sign that Bolvar, maybe the corruption's starting to get to him a little bit.
Okay.
He can only stave it off for so long. He says, for our final one, we're going to resurrect Tirion Fordring as a Death Knight. The Paladins are not going to be happy about this, but Light's
Yeah.
Hope Chapel and forcibly resurrect him as a Death Knight anyway. It does not work out so well.
I don't
And
think
that's actually the picture of our final slide here is the Light Soap Chapel. You can see that we have a statue of Tirion that he's honored there. And so he's basically buried right beneath the chapel. And so the Death Knights, they go and have a raid on the chapel. They're killing paladins, and they try to go and to get Tyrion's body. But remember how I said it's built on consecrated ground. Even the Lich King
yeah.
himself,
You did say
Tyrion
that.
had, yeah, Tyrion had, he'd been able to drive the Lich King himself away from this area. And actually, Lady Leadrin comes in and just like, super holy Nova Blast type of thing here, even though that's in Hearthstone, that sort of thing is more of a priest spell than a paladin spell. But
Yeah.
she basically does that sort of thing and is like, nope, you are not getting Tyrion. Tyrion is not becoming a Death Knight. And so
Good for her.
then Darian Mograine kind of gets killed by the Light as a Death Knight because remember, Paladins were invented to combat Death Knights in the first place.
Yes.
And so it's actually possible for a Death Knight to be killed as much as you can be killed from undeath by powerful lights like that. And so he just kind of gets re-resurrected as that final of the four horsemen there. But then, so that is basically where Tyrion's story ends. He is remembered as an example for paladins to follow. He is heavily honored by the third version of the Silver Hand,
Yeah.
and that is his legacy. He has quite the impactful story, and the world of Azeroth owes quite a bit to him. He is one of the greatest paladins to ever exist, honestly, and perfectly fitting for him to have been the very first paladin legendary card.
Man, it's crazy to hear all this. I had no idea that Tyrion, did so much. I didn't know he like would have this kind of legacy. I just thought going into this, it'd just be a story on, something about the Silver Hands. He had a son, maybe a wife and a family, they had a village, I don't know, a farm. But man, this is quite the show and quite the story. Man, thank you, Goliath, for giving us this content in this past hour on how the Paladins came to be. It's pretty cool to hear, man. I'm excited. And now when I play cards, with Crusader in it, I'll think about the stories, Scarlet Crusader, Argent, all the stuff like that. Right now in Wild and Buff Paladin is pretty popular. So cards with Crusader in the word in the name are in there. There's a 3 mana card. I think it's charge. Like a 2/1 Divine Shield charge. Thing's called Argent Crusader or Argent something. I gotta look it up. But it's just pretty cool to hear the backstories on this and you think of Hearthstone cards in the moment. But this story right here, I thought Egwin was cool. This one, yeah, man. Episode 2 definitely takes the cake, man. Really hyped about this.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great stuff, and since we're starting with all of these, a lot of the original cards from either the original classics or the core set, the reason that a lot of these characters were chosen in the first place is because they are such great examples of what that class is all about. Some of them a bit more so than others. King Crush, not so much of a this is what a hunter is all about type of thing. But for
Yeah,
a lot of them, like Egwin with the mage, and now we have Tyrion with the paladin. And there's going to be a lot more great stories that we can touch on in future episodes about even, what does it mean to be this class? Very, very exciting stories to share.
very exciting. All right. I hope everybody here enjoyed this episode. If you like our content, please check us out. Follow us on Twitter at LoremastersHS, as you can see in the video here. Subscribe to us on YouTube, and let us know in the comment section what you think about this episode. What a cool part of the story you liked, and hey, give us some ideas on what legends you guys want to hear about. Of course, we have our ideas in our catalog. Brainstorming, but hey, we are open to listen to the community, because that'll help us keep going. If we make the videos that you guys want to see sooner, you know, might bump up the viewage. But nonetheless, for me, you guys can find me on Twitter at Blakarot and on Twitch at Blakarot underscore. And for my co-host here,
Yes. If you enjoy the stories, you can find ones that I write as lore guides and articles on Out of Dot Cards. And I've recently begun streaming a bit more. So if you want to
ooh,
find me on Twitch, you can find me at Goliath the Dwarf on Twitch. And yeah, I don't do much social media aside from that, but if you want more of my content, want to talk, then those are the places to go.
all right, sounds great. Okay, everybody, we will see you next time. Take care.